Thank you all for joining us today for the first ever, or at least first in living memory, Precinct 4 community meeting. And it's exciting that it's virtual. This is a whole new world. So we're going to quickly go through the agenda. We're going to have a 20-minute presentation about the precinct by Ken Liss, who's from the Brookline Historical Society. Then we'll take 15 minutes and hear from our select board candidates, Heather Hamilton, Eric Hyatt, and John Van Scoyoc. They're each going to introduce themselves, and then we can go to a Q&A. And then we'll do 15 minutes with our town meeting member candidates. And there's 8 town meeting member candidates, including myself. I'll say the names a little bit later, followed again by an audience Q&A. And then we can just go to open discussion of other precinct issues. The way Q&A works, you should all be able to see on your Zoom bar a section called Q&A. And if you click there, you can type in a question, and that will go to the hosts to then share. And so if you have any questions on Q&A, you can always ask us. If there's any questions during any of this, you can also raise your hand as well. And then a couple quick reminders. June 9th is the town election. And you can request a ballot by going to the link that's on the screen, the brooklinema.gov/1761/early-voting. And just a reminder, in-person voting is reduced hours. It's noon to 8 p.m. only. June 14th, 1 to 3 p.m. is a housing forum about housing affordability in the age of COVID-19. There's a registration link there, and I'll also send a follow-up email about this to the group with more details about it. And then lastly, if you want to join the Precinct 4 listserv, you can email me to be signed up, or you can send an email to brookline-p4+subscribe@googlegroups.com. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ken and let him start his presentation. Thank you, Ken.
Great. Well, thank you, Mariah. Happy to be here. I did a presentation for Precinct 6, which is my precinct, yesterday, and Precinct 4 today. Probably the 2 precincts I know best. If the other precincts ask me, I've got a lot of work to do. But I think at this time when we're all very much living in the present and thinking about the future, I'm glad that you all have time to look back, also to know more about the past of the history of the precinct and of Brookline. I'm going to share my screen. I've got a PowerPoint, and let's see. So everybody seeing that okay without the slides on the side? Okay, so one of the things to think about when you talk about the history of the precinct is that the town's history and history in general doesn't necessarily follow along the lines of the precincts. And in fact, Brookline had no precinct for the first 210 years of its existence as an independent town. Brookline was the first town in Massachusetts to start using the representative town meeting form of government. It was proposed in a petition to the legislature in 1915. A lot of it was the work of this man, Alfred Chandler, in Brookline. It was adopted in November 1915. At the same time, suffrage was voted down in Brookline. The last full town meeting was in December of that year. And then in March of 1916, Brookline elected its first members of town meeting and held its first town meeting under the new format in March 22nd of 1916. But to understand the history of this precinct, it helps to go back further. This is a map done for the Brookline Historical Society in 1923, showing a part of Brookline in 1667. And the key part of this is really, I'm just going to bring up my pointer, is the bridge that was put in across the Muddy River, leading into what was then the hamlet of Muddy River, not yet an independent town. And the Sherburne Road ran to the west along Walnut Street and what became Route 9, but it also led into the area of Brookline Village that has become a part of what Precinct 4 is. The map on the left shows the outlines of the precinct in 1874, and I'm going to focus on a few parts of the precinct. One will be the town's first commercial district, which started along what's now known as Lower Washington Street, which kind of runs from the Boston line to where Washington Street turns up towards what we now think of as Brookline Village, as well as the area on Washington and Harvard Streets. The area known as the Farm down here, south of Route 9, the Lindens, and the area between the Lindens and Aspinwall Avenue. So those are the areas I'm going to focus on, starting with that commercial area. And the commercial area story really begins with this building, the Punch Bowl Tavern, which was built in 1717, expanded in 1740, and stood down more or less where 10 Brookline Place is now, and was a local gathering place. So it was a tavern, it was a social gathering place where people came together. It also served as a stopping point once the Worcester Turnpike, Route 9, was built for people coming in and out of Boston. And it was so well known that Brookline for a time was known as the Punch Bowl Tavern. And it was torn down in 1833, and several of the timbers of it were used for a number of houses that were built along Washington Street. Some of those houses still exist, although they were later moved to White Place. So there are 3 or 4 houses on White Place that incorporate timbers from the Punch Bowl Tavern. In the 1830s, the Brookline Lyceum Hall was built along Lower Washington Street. A lot of towns in New England had lyceum halls where concerts and lectures and other social and intellectual events were held, and became another kind of commercial center and social center for the town. But that stretch of Lower Washington Street between the Boston line where it turns up to the north really was the first commercial center. This view here on the left is looking from the Boston line down Washington Street to the west. And you can actually see there's a stone wall on the far right here. And that stone wall is still there. It's a stone wall just by where the Muddy River comes in. So that's looking west on Washington Street. Here are some examples of some of the businesses that stood along there. A shoeing and carriage work, a man named Thomas Nagel, a painting business, and many other things that were there on Lower Washington Street. This view on the left is looking from approximately Pond Street to the west. In the distance, you can see a sign for bowling, and that's the beginning of Brookline Avenue heading up toward the north. The picture on the right is looking the other way. This is about where Washington Street bends to the north, but it's looking to the east. So a lot of commercial businesses that were on that area of Lower Washington Street for much of that time. There's a sewer being put in this picture. Here's a picture looking to the west. And again, the building behind the trolley there is the building that is where the medical marijuana, the marijuana dispensary is now on the corner of Route 9 and Washington Street. So Washington Street goes up to the right, and you can see commercial businesses on both sides of the street that were there for much of the time. Here's another view from a little bit later, from 1915, a little bit more recognizable because of the firehouse. But again, you can see a lot of businesses along both sides of Washington Street. So that was the main commercial district, the first real commercial district for Brookline. A couple of the businesses that were there on the left is the Burns Pharmacy. There was at 127 Washington Street on the north side, just before it made the turn, and just across the street next to the firehouse, not the current firehouse, but the one that preceded it in the same location, was the Sing Lee Chinese Laundry. So a lot of businesses taking place in that area. This is a picture from the 1930s when much has changed. It's looking in the other direction toward the east, but you can see still a large commercial area along the Route 9 part of Washington Street. It's a little hard to tell where this picture is, but one thing that will tell you is over here in the distance is the bridge that's still there today, built as a WPA project. So that's the bridge that goes over Route 9 just before it crosses into Boston. And this is Parker Hill or Mission Hill up on the side. This picture shows the turn going up the bridge over the railroad tracks into what we think of as the Brookline Village Commercial District today. Again, with some stores down in Lower Washington Street. The building on the left is the one where the marijuana dispensary is now. Over here between these two buildings, on the left is the entrance to White Place. This building here is still standing. It's the building where the Village Works is today. Here's another view of the same area, looking up towards today's Brookline Village. This picture is from 1865, and it shows the beginnings of the over-the-bridge part of the Brookline Village Commercial District. In fact, many of the early ads would refer to businesses as being on the bridge or near the bridge. So Harvard Street goes off to the left, and Washington Street off to the left, and Harvard Street off to the right. And that was in 1865, a lot of wooden commercial buildings. But over time, those were replaced by brick buildings. This picture is from 1905, and you can see the Colonnade building on the right. The very far left is that same building where the Village Works is today. The church in the background burned in 1960, New Year's Eve, 1960, 1961. You can barely make out St. Mary's Church to the right of that. Here's a picture from the 1930s showing Brookline Village, and almost all the buildings in this picture are still standing today. The only exceptions are that church that burned, and over here where you can barely see it to the left is the 1873 town hall torn down in the 1960s. Another picture from the 1930s shows the Colonnade buildings. There's a set of 3 buildings, all built in the 1870s. The one on the far right, which is not visible here, is where the post office is today. Trolleys came down both Washington Street and Harvard Street. By the 1930s, the trolleys ended here and went down Huntington Avenue into Boston. So they didn't go further up into Brookline. But as late as 1930s, these were still in existence and providing transportation through Brookline. The commercial area of Brookline Village, which is kind of split between Precinct 6 and Precinct 4, includes some beautiful architecture in a style that's often referred to as panel brick architecture, because it has these decorative brickwork on many of the buildings. Some of them are many commercial buildings, some residential buildings, and some like the building in the center that have a mix of commercial and residential. And these are to me one of the real treasures of Brookline, because the buildings are beautiful, the brickwork is beautiful, and they've lasted a long time and continue to be used as commercial space in Brookline Village. So make sure to, as you walk around Brookline Village, take a look at some of the detailing on some of these buildings as you go by. This is the intersection generally referred to as Harvard Square, where Washington Street goes to the left and Harvard Street to the right. The building in the center was actually in Precinct 6. It was replaced in 1905 by the building that's currently there that holds the Brookline Bank and HealthWorks. The building on the right is a bank building that still stands today, and other buildings along Harvard Street to the north of it. And I love these two pictures. We don't have a lot of interior images of some of the businesses in Brookline's commercial districts, but both of these spaces are along Harvard Street, and they're both coffee shops today. The sketch on the left of the opening of the new post office in 1903, that's actually Cafe Nero in the old bank building in Brookline Village. When I first showed this to the staff and the managers in Cafe Nero and said that this used to be the post office, they said, well, that explains why there's a mail slot in the bathroom door. So apparently they salvaged one of the old doors that had a mail slot in it. It's been covered up, so no peeking inside the bathrooms there. But when we're open again, one of the bathrooms there, you'll see a mail slot in it. The picture on the right is the Woolworths that was in Brookline Village from 1914 until the 1980s, and that occupied the space that is now split between Starbucks and Vizio Optical. When I first looked at this picture and saw the skylights, I thought, it's a 2-story building. How can there be skylights? Well, it is a 2-story building, but the second story in the back was added later on. That explains how you can have buildings like this. So that, in brief, there's lots more I could talk about the commercial district, but it was the main commercial district in Brookline until the development of Coolidge Corner in the late 19th century, and it remains an important commercial center of the town today. Brookline has never had much in the way of industry, but one exception in Precinct 4 was the building known as the Holzer Cabot Company. And it was formed by a German immigrant named Charles Holzer, who started out in the building in Harvard Square that we looked at a little while ago. And in 1874, the map there shows just above the date 1874 says the Catholic Church. And that's actually the building that's pictured on the right, the top right. That was the original St. Mary's Church built in the 1850s. And when the current St. Mary's was built in the 1880s, Charles Holzer took over that building, and that was his first plant. And this is from a Holzer Cabot brochure on the right showing the Brookline plant in 1885. He later, the 1893 map shows the electric works there, and the 1907 map shows in the pink that he built brick around the edges of the wooden building. And that's the building that still exists on Station Street today. Shown in this picture, that was the Holzer Cabot Electric Company that was there from the time they took over the old church building until 1919, I believe, when they left, and the building has been a number of uses since then. Holzer Cabot built a lot of kinds of motors that were produced for jewelers, for horns, for all kinds of different kinds of products. They were known for building something known as annunciators. Annunciators were electrical devices that would signal either through an electric current. They would either light up a light or flip a number, and they were used in elevators, they were used in ships, they were used in hotels. When somebody wanted to call for service, they would push a button and something would light up at the desk of the hotel, and they would know which room was calling for help. The Holzer Cabot Company also made telephone equipment. They provided a lot of the equipment that was used as telephones spread west into the western United States. And the first suburban telephone exchange in the United States came from Boston, where the telephone was invented in 1876, through the Holzer Cabot building in 1880, where there were 8 telephone lines running from the Holzer Cabot building to different homes in Brookline, and a trunk line running into the main line into Boston. So that was all in the Holzer Cabot. One of the most interesting things about the Holzer Cabot Company is something that was not their regular business, but in 1891, a lumber magnate named Fisk Warren from Waltham had come back from Europe where he had seen electric cars, and he wanted to have one built for himself. And he came to Holzer Cabot to build the engine. And this is a picture of that first electric car. Sometimes described as the first non-experimental electric car built in the United States. Built in 1891, it was built on a carriage body. You can see the picture of a carriage from an ad, and it looks very similar to it, but Holzer Cabot built the electrical part of this, and it rolled out of that building on Station Street in 1891. 2 years later, the carriage was built by a man named Michael Quinlan, who had a carriage shop in the village. So here's the 2 arrows point to the Holzer Cabot Electric Works and Michael Quinlan's electric carriage works. And 2 years later, Holzer Cabot built a second thing that looks a little bit more like a car. This was another electric vehicle piloted here by Charles Holzer. It may be the Board of Selectmen taking them for a ride. I know that at one point he took them for a ride up Fisher Hill, and it tipped over backwards. Nobody was hurt. But there was a lot of skepticism about introducing electric vehicles and scaring horses, but that all came out of that building on Station Street. So that was the one kind of major industry in the area. This map shows the area to the south of Lower Washington Street on the left in the 1874 map, and on the right you can see this is where the Brook House is today. This map from earlier shows down in the lower left, it says S. Kimball. It was a farm known as the Kimball Farm, and later was developed with housing and filled in, as you can see on the right, with a number of streets, Walter Avenue, Juniper Street, Morse Avenue, and several others filled with houses. And this is a picture of it from up on, I believe this is up on Mission Hill. So Washington Street kind of runs across the middle right here. This building over here is actually the old St. Mary's Church, at that point, part of Holzer Cabot. Here's the 1873 Town Hall. And this area in here was this neighborhood known as the Farm. And it was largely an immigrant neighborhood, largely an Irish immigrant neighborhood. Outlined in red in the left is one of the streets, Walter Avenue. And from the 1900 directory, you can see quite a lot of Irish names there. And the occupations, a lot of laborers, janitor, coachman, a shoemaker, a baggage master, an electrician. So this was largely an Irish working class neighborhood. And it remained so for a very long time. On the bottom is an image from the 1955 directory. Now women are listed as well, so you have a number of housewives, but the occupations include mechanic and carpenter and painter and laborer and operator and inspector, as a fireman, and again, a lot of Irish names. So this remained a predominantly working class, largely Irish neighborhood well into the 1950s. This is an aerial view of the neighborhood looking to the south from the 1950s. So Leverett Pond is on the left, and the neighborhood, you've got here's the fire station and the bank building, now the marijuana dispensary, High Street going up the hill, and this is the neighborhood that was known as the Farm. And over here on the other side of Route 9 was the area known as the Marsh, which was similar in construction, a lot of working class, largely immigrant or children of immigrant population. In the 1950s, there was a lot of movement starting as early as the 1940s to change this. It was the era of urban development. And I actually did some more research, and I found this one just this morning. So I had never seen this one before, but this was a 1958 article showing a proposed design for Brookline Village for where Brookhouse is, with a kind of skyscraper and these two round buildings with all of the apartments that never got built. Kind of interesting that it talks about the origin of this program dates from '47, when the Brookline Health Department made a survey of the area and recommended it changed. It talks about how it met with widespread approval from government officials, civic planners, architects, and professionals, keeping with the modern progressive thinking. I don't think they asked the people who lived there too much what they thought about these plans. But in 1961, a building was built. It's shown, it's circled on the map, and it's the building below, which was 100 units of low-income housing. And many, if not most of the people who lived in the Farm moved into that building. And here's from 1963, people living in that building. And you can see, again, a lot of Irish names, a lot of working class occupations who moved into that building. There was a lot of controversy, a lot of lawsuits around the building, including that there was no provision for moderate income housing. But in 1962, bids were taken to demolish 47 2- and 3-story structures of wood and brick that had made up the Farm. And in 1968, Brookhouse development was under construction. There's an aerial view of it in 1968 and a view of it today. The building with the 100 low-income units is over here and down here. So those were built. It was interesting seeing these ads for Brookhouse when it opened, including my favorite one about the strolling through a leafy glade at the Brookhouse with tree-shaded walks, lavishly tint roof gardens, and a giant waterfall, just a few of the natural beauties that give the Brookhouse its air of peace and tranquility. I certainly don't think of the Brookhouse development as a leafy glade, but and I don't think those trees are actually on the Brookhouse grounds, but that's the way they were advertising it. And this in 1972 is the residence of part of the Brookhouse, including in the right-hand column where they lived the year before. So you can see that people were coming from Boston, from West Roxbury, from Wellesley, from Newton, from New York, from Cambridge, and largely a middle-class population that kind of took over this space. I'm going to talk now about one other development that's a much older development in Precinct 4, which is the Lindens. And this was a development Thomas Aspinwall Davis, unmuted. And
Ken, that was my fault. I meant to unmute myself, but I just wanted
okay.
to make sure that we stay on time because we're a couple minutes over already.
I've got about 2 minutes left. So.
Okay, great, thanks.
So Thomas Aspinwall Davis built this development on his family farm in the 1840s. And this was his house, stood at the end of the park, and the house still exists, so it's been moved on to Linden Place. Several of the 1840s houses still exist in the neighborhood, along with newer houses. The area between the Lindens and Aspinwall was largely undeveloped in 1874. You can see a lot of open land with Thomas Aspinwall filled in today. In 1888, Brook Street was laid out. By 1893, Bowker Street was laid out, as well as Hurd Avenue, and that slowly filled in. By 1900, a lot of houses built, and part of that area, just to the right of, just to the east of Kent Street, was a house built, and that was occupied by Ulysses and Florida Ruffin Ridley. Their house still stands at 131 Kent Street, and of course, Florida Ruffin Ridley is the person for whom the Coolidge Corner School will now be named, who was a resident of this neighborhood. I'll end just by saying that there's lots more information on our website, brooklinehistoricalsociety.org, and on my blog called brooklinehistory.blogspot.com. Lots more pictures and stories about Brookline, Precinct 4, and elsewhere. And we would love to have anyone who wants to become a member join that helps support our free programs that we do throughout the year, including neighborhood walking tours once we're back walking. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back over to Mariah.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful, Ken. That was really great. With that, I'm going to bring up Heather and Eric and John, if you want to turn on your videos. Let me see. Yep, we've got the three of you now. So the next part of our presentation, I'm going to ask you each to do a quick 2-minute introduction of yourself, as well as you feel. What are the most important issues facing the town other than the budget? And then how will you address the budget and these other issues? And we'll go alphabetically. So Heather, we can start with you. And I'm going to time you 2 minutes, and I'm going to be rude and cut you off when we get to 2 minutes if you're still going, okay?
Great, thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Heather Hamilton, and I am running for re-election to the Select Board. I'm a project manager in the transportation practice at BSC Group, a civil engineering firm in Boston. I previously worked at the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, overseeing a fleet of 5,000 highway vehicles. I have a master's in transportation policy and another master's in public administration. We are facing a number of challenges in the days, weeks, and months ahead. Tomorrow, the governor will unveil a 4-phase plan to bring back aspects of our economy safely. I personally hope he addresses whether public schools will remain closed in September, as that may be the single most significant impact on our budget. The budget crisis is real. The town took the action to furlough some employees to balance the budget for fiscal year 20, but severe cuts are looming for fiscal years 21 and 22. We do not yet know by how much our revenues will decrease and when life will return to normal, if ever. I'm committed to making this process as transparent, as collegial, and as equitable as possible. It is precisely because of our very serious budgetary situation that we need to increase diversity within our form of government. Choices will need to be made that reflect our values as a community and will impact all residents. In order to decrease our blind spots, we need as wide array of lived experience as possible, asking questions, reviewing proposals, and voting at town meeting. I'm truly honored I have had the privilege of serving over the past 3 years, and I'm asking for your vote this townwide election season. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Next up is Eric Hyatt. Eric, can you unmute yourself? And you've got 2 minutes as well.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Eric Hyatt. I'm a Brookline native. I grew up on Mason Terrace. I went to Driscoll, Brookline High School, and school within a school. I worked for 25 years in the corporate world as an executive and contract negotiator at companies like Microsoft and Experian. And I have negotiated contracts about 3 times the size of the total town of Brookline budget. I am a renter. I live with my boyfriend, Teddy Weinberg. If I'm elected, I'll be the town of Brookline's first openly gay select board member. The past 12 years I've spent back in Brookline have been dedicated to public service, lifting up the community in various ways. I earn my living as a Japanese translator, and I run a small business that helps Japanese companies do business in the US. For me, the top issue outside of the budget is definitely safely navigating the COVID pandemic. And when I say safely, I really mean safely as in thinking about everyone in Brookline, all the stakeholders in the town, including our small business community, and as well as, of course, the people I care about the most and that I spend the time with the most, which is our low-income families. I teach a class for mothers who live in Brookline Housing Authority housing. It's sponsored by the town's Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations. And I'm really privileged to spend time with some low-income families, so I do understand the disproportionate impact of the COVID pandemic on these families. And so they'll be first and foremost in my mind as we are talking about rebuilding the town.
Thank you. John, you have 2 minutes as well.
Hi, Mariah, and hello, everybody who's listening in and watching. I don't want to date myself too much, but I noted that Ken brought the history up to the early 70s, which is right around the time, 1975, when I started as a very young newspaper editor in Brookline, editor in charge of a paper called the Brookline Chronicle-Citizen. By coincidence, a few years after that, I became a president of the Brookline Historical Society, which is, of course, what Ken is today. I can also tell you that in those days, people still referred to the farm and the marsh. Brookline has seen many, many battles over development before. One of them was the so-called B2 marsh parcel battle. Ken could probably write a book about that one of these days. My wife and I have been homeowners in Brookline since 1975. Yes, the same year that I started as that I was involved as the editor of the Brookline Chronicle. We had 2 kids who went through the schools and got terrific educations. We're very deeply appreciative of the excellence of the schools in Brookline. I then got involved early on in politics and have been a town meeting member for 30 years, twice on the advisory committee, once as chair. And I've learned over those years that experience really helps when Brookline faces a crisis. And we're facing a crisis right now. I don't have to tell you what it is, COVID-19. And I just want to say that where Precinct 4 is concerned, I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on at least 1 or 2 top priorities. One is the Pierce School, which I think someone said to me the other day, and I have no reason to doubt it. The Pierce School community is one of the strongest communities in Brookline, and we want to see that project move forward and brought to a successful conclusion. The other thing I want to say quickly, because I'm running out of time, is that the retail establishments are so vital to the energy and the...
John, I'm going to cut you off because we're at two minutes.
Okay, Mariah, thank you.
Yes, thank you. So we can open it up to Q&A from the attendees. Anyone who wants to ask a question, just raise your hand and I'll call on you. And I'll start off by asking a question which is tied, I think, integrally to what the 3 of you have already brought up as your priorities, which is development of Brookline Village and inclusion and housing. So if you could, and we'll maybe let us know, and it doesn't have to be, it can be more of a free-flowing conversation. What do you think about development, both commercial and of residential, particularly affordable housing in the village? What's been done and what could be done better? What should be done differently? It would be great if you could give us your thoughts. Who wants to start? If you want to just raise your hand. Heather?
I'll start. I think a good intro into this is the Kent Street Senior Affordable Housing Project that is being proposed for the municipal-owned parking lot at grade between Kent Street and Station Street. So I think this is kind of a microcosm of a macrocosm to get at a lot of your points. I'm for building more housing stock and also more, commercial stock. I think that as we just saw through the last presentation, that as time goes on, there is development. It's a sign of the times. And some of the images that I see when we reflect on how things used to be is that Brookline has not exactly changed all that much. And, trying to get 2/3 at town meeting is a high bar. But I know I'm probably going to preempt something that John is about to say, that we need to find a balance where, residential properties drain a lot of municipal sources. So we need to find that balance of commercial and residential in order to find a happy medium where everybody can live here and everybody can have a shop here that wants to.
Thank you. Eric or John, do you want to add anything?
I'll jump in.
Okay, I just want to also just keep in mind, we have a couple more questions in the audience too, so try and keep each answer short so we can get to a couple questions.
Sure. I would also point out, and thank you, Ken, for bringing this out, one of the real assets of the Brookline Village area is its historic buildings and that array of the panel brick buildings right there in the heart of the village of Precinct 4. And by the way, the housing stock is among the oldest in Brookline. And I think what we really should set as an objective is how do we work within the parameters of the existing very, very important retail building legacy that we have there, as well as the housing stock legacy that we have there, and make development in the future respectful of the importance of that captured past to the charm and the essence of Brookline Village.
Thank you. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll keep it quick too. I feel Brookline Village has been both over and underdeveloped, and I'm not satisfied with the way it is right now. The streetscape is poor, the traffic patterns are poor. The business I know best in Brookline Village is the Village Works, the co-working space, and their ownership has told me that they still need a percentage of their clients to be able to arrive via car. So I'm advocating kind of a rethink before we grant any more zoning exemptions or waivers in the village. I'd like to rethink the streetscape. I want to make it more pedestrian friendly, more bicycle friendly, but also we have to create some municipal parking, which will generate much needed revenue for Brookline. So I support a redevelopment of Brookline Village, preserving our historical heritage, but creating a much, much better environment for the people who live and work there.
Thank you. Donelle, I'm going to call on you. I see your hand is raised. You might need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I think I just did. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. So I guess my question is with in regards to the Brookline Police Department and their collective bargaining agreement. So if you were to become a select board member and continue on, Heather, how would you address the need for, how would you tackle getting the collective bargaining agreement done for the Brookline Police Department? I say that because there's been interest in body cameras for the police, and the police have not said no to it. They actually want it. And example of how crucial the need for the body cams was an example with the incident with the car chase up Route 9 and it ended in Chestnut Hill. And we have the DA asking for any footage of it. Now, if our Brookline Police Department had body cameras, there would have been footage. And also, body cameras cannot be enacted if the collective bargaining agreement is not done. I'm just going to be straightforward with you guys and let you know. I know Mel Kleckner is supposed to be in charge of that. So how would you, knowing that he has a lot on his plate, relieve some of that pressure on him on getting the collective bargaining agreement done with the Brookline Police Department? And it would also, to note, it would help the community because the community will feel safer knowing that the police have body cameras on them, so everything they do is being recorded. Especially
Thanks, Donelle.
Thank you.
Why don't we turn it over to them and see what they want to answer?
Very well. How do I unmute?
I think I can mute you.
Thank
Heather, John, Eric, any thoughts on body cameras? John?
I will say that Donelle pretty much said it for us, I think. He said it for me for sure. The key issue in this, as to why it's urgent that this get done, is that this isn't just another collective bargaining agreement about pay scales. It involves something that is central to Brookline's efforts to make forward progress on diversity, inclusion, equity issues, and quite frankly, on issues of whether racism has played a part and racial profiling has played a part in the administration of justice in Brookline and the policing of Brookline. And if the police are at this point willing to go ahead with the body cameras, I think the message just has to be delivered to Mel, perhaps in slightly more urgent terms. Don't look at this as just any other negotiation. It's dragged on for 3 years. We've paid a price for it because people think that somehow the fact that we haven't reached an agreement is a signal of a lack of will to get something done that's important in terms of racial justice and equity. So let's get it done.
Thank you. Heather or Eric? Go ahead, Heather.
So this is very frustrating for me. So when I worked at MassDOT, I actually got to participate in collective bargaining. And I was kind of disappointed when I found out that the select board doesn't really have that much to do with collective bargaining, especially when it comes to fire and police, in a way that I guess protects us. But the downside is we're reacting to something that we did not really participate in and seems fully baked when it finally comes to us. I'm for body cameras. Now, that being said, a lot of town meeting members who have brought warrant articles about surveillance might not be as amenable to that kind of surveillance. I agree that we should definitely find a way to make it happen, but usually in collective bargaining, even when the two parties agree, it comes down to dollars. What is the union going to get for allowing us to require body cameras? And we have to partner with the state in order to, I guess, prevent us from giving away too much. So if the state sets out a requirement for body cameras, then they have to comply, and this gets taken out of collective bargaining altogether.
Thank you. Eric?
Yeah, of course, police officers should be wearing body cameras, and I know that they support that and that they feel that would help protect them as well as protect our citizenry. But there's a lot of things that can be done right now by the police force that are one shy of expensive technological solutions. My friends and students who live in our affordable housing report that those areas are extremely over-policed. And so to me, that's a waste of police resources, spending so much time by the public housing creating an environment where people living in those places are feeling a sense of fear and oppression that is not warranted by the crime rate in those areas. So I think the police, even without resorting to new technology, can modify their behaviors. I support community policing. That can only be done if we have workforce housing in Brookline that can accommodate our police officers and their families. So I want to work at the things that I can do as a select board member. And body cameras is one that sounds like it, well, we're hearing from a select board member that the select board itself can't do that much. Nonetheless, there's a ton that can be done to improve the behaviors and the quality of life of the Brookline police.
Thank you. Vena, you're going to, I'm going to take your question next. I think this is going to be the last question for select board before we turn it over to town meeting. Vena, can you? Oh,
Hi,
I hear you.
yeah.
Hi.
Okay, cool. So I'm really big on kind of what you hit, Eric, with the whole like understanding that what people in public housing have gone through. And this kind of hits home for me because I myself grew up in public housing. So I really am so for moving more people in so that it's more racially diverse. But the one issue, at least from what I have experienced, because I'm in an affordable unit, sorry about the 2-year-old background, is that we are accepting a lot of people to come in of lower income. But the issues that I'm also seeing is that there's no mandate on taking vouchers for daycare. So like we're moving in people of lower income and middle income here to Brookline, but we're not actually taking care of the package so that we can break the chain, break the cycle. There's not a lot of support in, yes, we want to take people in, but they're kind of staying stuck. So great that you guys do, I mean, you do the class and the outreach, but there isn't a lot of help for the people that are in there. I know Step 6 Success is a great resource for the children, but that's kind of the next generation. What about the people that, the moms, the dads, the parents, whatever, that are in there now currently? What are the sources going to be for those people that we're taking in Brookline to help have them learn how to contribute or how to provide them resources to be able to contribute?
Thanks, Vena. Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you, and thanks for an awesome question. It does lead to the next point, which is how do we include anybody into our town government? How do we include anybody? The answer is we have to meet them and look at their needs. So in this particular case, people in housing care so much about Brookline. I know because they talk about it in their writing, they talk about it to me, but for them to participate in town government is hundreds of hours per year of volunteer work. Most of it is completely unpaid. Even select board, our town's top executive job, pays $2.44 an hour. I mean, $2.44 an hour is not an appropriate wage. We offer no childcare for this position. We offer no childcare for any of our town committees. So how is anybody supposed to become an active contributing participant to our town government until we reevaluate the criteria for participation?
Go ahead, John.
I want to actually give Mariah credit for being one of the people who has raised the childcare issue at town meeting. And I have to say, I think that's only one way of looking at this. And it's a good way of looking at it. We should investigate it more, but we also should investigate things such as look at what we're participating in right now. That could be extended to include people like Vena, and many others from Brookline Housing Authority, from where you name it, from every element, every segment, every neighborhood, every part of town can participate in this type of a forum. And so I think one of the strange kind of effects of the COVID-19 crisis is that as really hard on us as this has been, it's also opened our eyes to certain things. And I think it's opened our eyes to how we can use technology to increase inclusiveness and to increase engagement in local government. And I would love to explore those avenues quickly on the idea of stipends for all of the volunteers. Yeah, let's look at it. I think eventually it's going to be a question of whether we become a city rather than simply taking all of the existing boards and commissions with volunteers and figuring out how to provide stipends for all of them. I haven't done the count, but if Eric would do the count, I think he would probably find in the neighborhood of 300, 400 volunteers on the various boards and commissions that serve the town. So it's not a simple proposal to simply float and assume because it sounds good that it's something that we should just go ahead and do.
Thank you. Heather, do you want to last word before we switch over to the
Sure.
town meeting members? Thank you.
I mean, there are lots of layers to this particular issue. I know that we have been looking at trying to up the subsidy of childcare in Brookline, and that predates COVID. The downside of being this close to Boston is that prices are higher. And so the subsidy is usually, the rate is set, I think, statewide. And so our average is just higher in this part of the state. So it doesn't go as far. But we made success on Section 8. So I'm hopeful that we might be able to do the same thing with subsidy with childcare. That being said, though, things might get worse. I recall an email correspondence from a childcare facility that is in serious trouble right now because they are not open and they cannot pay their rent. And they said that, you know, depending on how the governor's proposal phasing is unveiled tomorrow, they may have to shut their doors. So this is definitely a supply and demand issue, and it might get worse because some of these businesses will not survive when we are reopening things. So more to come. It's definitely on all of our radars.
Thank you. Now, thank you to the three of you for participating. This was really great. I'm going to, if you actually can turn off your videos and mute yourselves, and then I'm going to, I think we have a couple people in the attendees who are meant to present in this next section. I think Robert is one of them, and Margie is one of them. And if all of the town meeting members who are up this year, let me see if you can turn on your video, and let me see. So we got Christine. I'm just doing a quick count to make sure I've got everybody. Peter, I think I accidentally made you a panelist, but you shouldn't be. Who did I miss? I'm missing, let me see. Nadine, I haven't seen. Liz, you are a panelist. Me, Vena, you should become a panelist. There we go, Vena. Nope, Vena looks like she's disappeared. I don't see her. Did you make her a panelist, Raul?
Yeah, she's up.
You did. Okay, and Christine is up, Margie, Marissa, and Robert, and me. Okay, so why don't we start with, let me turn on my video as well. Why don't we start with, I don't see Nadine, so we'll start with Liz, and if you could give yourself a 1-minute brief bio and what you think are the most important issues for the precinct, and I will again be cutting everyone off at a minute.
Okay. I'm Liz Linder, a resident and business owner in Brookline Village. Since moving to Station Street 17 years ago, I've grown to love this community for its character, culture, history, and progressive values centering on environment, sustainability, and education. Whether or not the pace of development continues here, I strongly believe it must further these values. Since getting involved in affordable housing and other neighborhood concerns, I'm well aware of the diverse needs within the residential and commercial neighborhood and how development fits into that. It's impossible to responsibly consider municipal decisions without taking into account impacts from COVID-19. The challenges we face in the near term will affect different segments of the population unevenly and will test the vitality of Brookline as a whole. Minimizing economic disruption and resulting hardships while planning a sustainable course requires fresh perspective and effective communication within the town. As a photographer whose work puts me in front of leaders in innovation, finance, healthcare, and education, I will apply design-based thinking and broad perspective to our challenges and bring this insight to the greater conversation. Thank you for considering me.
Thanks, Liz. We'll skip me for now so that I can keep going with the moderating. Why don't we go to you, Vena, next? You have 1 minute. and you're on mute, so you ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll just start with my bio, I guess. I'm a fourth generation native. I'm a mother of 4 children, 2 of which are attending Brookline Public Schools. One is at BEEP, and the other is at a local daycare around here that takes the voucher. I currently work at Rise Realty as a real estate agent, and I'm per diem at Boston Children's Hospital, going on 7 years now. I am really big on being the voice of those who are unheard. I myself grew up in poverty in Brookline housing. I had my first child as a teenager and made it through college at Pine Manor. I understand the struggles of being judged here in Brookline, and for 6 years I have lived in my affordable condo here in Brookline Village on Juniper Street. I lost track. In closing, I just wanted you guys all to know that my heart is unconditional for this town and for all the members of the community that are not even seen or heard.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Christine?
Hold on.
You need to go off of mute, Christine.
Sorry about that. I've been a resident and homeowner in Brookline for 37 years, and I just love this community. I love everything about it. I love the diversity of the neighborhood I live in, and I'm very proud that my daughter who is a graduate of Lincoln Elementary School and Brookline High, class of 2001. I'm a recently retired professor of political science at Boston University, and my specialization was public policy analysis and research methods, and I love to analyze. And this is a way for me to give back to the community that I have loved and that's been so important to me by running for town meeting member. I'm a registered Democrat, but I like to think of myself as a liberal without illusions. I do my homework, and I'm willing to question conventional wisdom when research shows I should.
Your time's up, Christine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Margie, do you want to go ahead? You have to go off of mute first.
Thanks. Thanks, Mariah, for organizing this. This has really been very impressive and interesting, and I am loving hearing from the other people running for town meeting as well. I feel honored to be among you running for re-election. I was thinking this morning about growing up basically being bottle-fed activism and commitment to community. My mother was a big activist, so much so that I was playing meeting instead of house and school, and I have brought that attitude into my participation in Brookline, both as a member of town meeting and also someone interested and engaged in national politics recently by organizing the neighborhood and beyond to write postcards to support voter registration in Georgia. That said, my commitment to Brookline is deep. I have been a resident here for since 1985, so a long time. My
You're out of time, Margie.
Oh,
Sorry. Marissa, I think you're up. Are you ready? You're still on mute.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Marissa Vogt, and I'm just going to hold this up here.
It's backwards.
Oh, no. Okay, good. It's up on my screen as frontwards, but okay, that's taking way too much time. But yeah, I don't have enough time to tell you all about my views on everything. So you can find me online and on Twitter, but I'll just start by saying that I'm a research scientist at BU and I study planetary space physics. I've lived here in Brookline since 2014 with my husband. And since then, we've had 2 kids that are going to go to public school here in Brookline. And we bought our place here in 2018. And I love public education, public transportation, affordable housing, community journalism and transparency, science and evidence-based decision-making. So I enjoy living in Brookline and the progressive values in this community. But I'm running for town meeting in part because I'm thinking about what should a town meeting member do, because anyone can present a warrant article, but
Marissa, you're up.
I think we should be community facilitators. Thanks.
Thank you. Robert, are you ready? Gotta unmute.
I'm ready now.
Okay.
So my name's Robert Volk. I've owned a 2-family on Linden Street since 1993. I'm a law professor at Boston University, and I'm running for re-election for town meeting. I think one thing that's become clear to me during this crisis is I've been volunteering at the Brookline pantry over at the St. Paul Church. And frankly, I was shocked to see the great need that we have in this pretty wealthy town of so many people who are in need, desperate need for services. I think one thing at town meeting, I'm always in favor of increasing affordable housing, increasing help for the lower income people in this town, and helping to keep our schools great. And I'm increasingly concerned that our town government is no longer serving us as it should, given the size and complexity of the town of Brookline. And I hope you'll support me for re-election. If you support me, you know you'll get a vote.
Your time's up.
I'm done.
Thank you. Okay, I'll say really quickly, let me just set the timer for myself. My name's Mariah Nobrega. I was born and raised in Brookline. My husband and I have 3 kids at BHS, at Pierce, and in preschool. I've been in town meetings since 2009, and over that time I've contributed to town service in many ways. In addition, I sat on the town's finance committee from 2015 to 2019. I'm on the Commission for Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations for the past year, and starting with this next election, I'm uncontested for school committee, so I'll be on school committee as well. In our precinct, I'm really concerned about development, affordability, how we make sure that the development that happens here is smart, both residential and commercial. We've had some big projects. We have the hotel, we have Children's Hospital. Those were very stressful to the neighbors. And they don't address that we have enough affordable housing. So what we're going to be doing on those fronts is things that I'm really concerned about. And that's my 1 minute. And now I think we can turn it over. If there's any questions from the public, we can have questions to us, or we can also just take it up. Oh, I see, I think there's a question here. Yep, so I'm gonna call on Judy. Judy, you are, I think, probably on mute, so you need to, there we go.
Okay,
Go ahead.
For both the selectmen and the town meeting members, for the selectmen, how many votes do we have? Are they all, is only one of them an incumbent, and how many votes do we get? How many?
You mean how
positions
many?
are getting filled?
How many? There's 5 select board members. Heather, there's two of them are up this year. Heather is running for re-election, and the other person, Ben Franco, has chosen not to run.
And with the town meeting members, which of you are incumbents, and how many do we vote for?
Well, we vote for 3.
No, for town meeting, 5.
5, I'm
You
sorry.
vote for 5. And of the people you see in front of you, Margie, myself, Vena, and Robert are all sitting town meeting members.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Donelle, I see you have a question. I just called on you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to say thank you all for running. Really, really appreciate it. Please, if elected, and the ones who are already elected and incumbents, continue to speak up like you have been. I feel our precinct is very, very strong, and I would love to see continue that way. So I just want to say thank you all for running. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You can unmute me now. Thank you.
And we have one more question from Jenny. Jenny, go ahead. You might need to unmute yourself.
Okay. I am wondering what all of you believe in terms of a possible acquisition or not of Newbury College space. It's 8 acres. It's lots of green space. It's buildings ready to go, an academic building. I've done calculations showing that if we did an override, it would cost $34 for the average condo owner a year, $124 for the average single family owner per year. And I know times are really tight, but I see this as the best opportunity we will have probably in our lifetime to get something that size in Nobro. And I wanted to know what you all think. The other option is to allow Welltower to increase the size by 5-fold and have a gargantuan building, senior housing on the Fisher Hill. So just want to know what you all think.
Does anyone, okay, go ahead, Margie, unmute yourself. You're still on mute, you got to unmute.
Ginny, I have been following this discussion on town meeting and was so impressed by the calculations that you put forward, you know, the listserv town meeting discussions. I am so in favor. You have completely convinced me that this makes sense.
Thank you.
I also strongly agree with you. I mean, the plans I've seen on the discussion group that Margie referred to, this is an opportunity we shouldn't let pass by.
Anyone else want to share their thoughts? No? Okay. Why don't we go to the, oh, I think there's another hand up. Hold on. Alan, Chris wants to talk. Alan, I'm going to turn you on. Go ahead.
I was just wondering what everyone's position was on affordable housing creation, both town-wide and in Precinct 4 specifically.
Does anyone want to take that? Go ahead, Robert.
You know, I realize there's limited funds available, especially now, for creation of affordable housing. But I think that Brookline is a desirable area for development. And I think when we let developers in, we should make affordable housing part of the price they pay for the privilege of building in Brookline. And wherever there is opportunity, for example, the project that's proposed on Kent Street, we should go forward with it. So, yeah.
Go ahead, Christine. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah. I've been delivering groceries for Mutual Aid Brookline, and I've come to know the areas in the Brookline Village, well, in all of Brookline. And I am so impressed by the development Village Way that's that includes full price housing, subsidized housing, and really subsidized housing. And I think that's the way to go, although I could be convinced otherwise with more information. But my experience is that this is the kind of housing we would want in Brookline.
Mixed income housing, you mean?
Yes, mixed income.
Yes. Yeah. Anyone else want to? Vena, go ahead.
I completely agree with you, Christine, with the mixed income housing. I see that a lot of times what I was seeing was that like the poverty, like the people of lower income or affordable housing was kind of being pushed to the edges of Brookline. Like even here, we're on the edge of Boston, Egmont on the edge of Brookline. And a lot of mixed housing, I think, would be beneficial to the community, and it would actually bring us more together. So hopefully more developments, even using a 403B housing, like in building condos even, would be awesome too.
Anyone else want to add in thoughts? Liz, go ahead. You're on mute still. And then I think after Liz and Marissa, maybe Margie talk, we should open it up to the public for anyone else who we can just sort of generally open things up and then we'll end the formal part. People can just talk and go whenever, because we're already 10 minutes over. Go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, I'm very pro affordable housing. I'm working, I live on Station Street, and I am interested in seeing that project integrate into the neighborhood. If it goes forward, I'm interested in seeing it become a part of the culture of the neighborhood, that it integrates in with the retail space, with the with respect to the residents who already live there, and becomes part of the face of Brookline, which you see when you're coming down Route 9. Basically, it's almost like an invitation into the town. So I'd want to see a project that's done thoughtfully and with respect to the surroundings, so that it really integrates well.
Thank you. I think Margie had her hand up, so why don't you go ahead, Margie, and then we can have Marissa, and then we'll wrap it up for this part.
I did. I just wanted to really quickly say, yes, I agree with pretty much all of the above, with a heavy underlining of the idea of mixed income. It's good for the community. It's good for the residents to not be isolating and concentrating affordable housing in the ways that was done traditionally. So as we go forward. Thanks.
Marissa, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'm very pro affordable housing. So I agree with what everyone said, but I also want to add that we shouldn't forget about the people who don't necessarily qualify for public housing, but are still very rent burdened. So they're working, but they are spending more than 30% of their income on their housing. And, we need to be more creative in everything from zoning rules to regulations, like maybe restricting or banning broker fees and other town policies, just to help folks, especially renters who maybe can't quite afford their housing, even though they don't qualify for public assistance.
Thanks. With that, I think we can open it up to general conversation from the public too. I see Dan Fishman has his hand up. I think what I can do is I can click on allow to talk for everybody. And then, or maybe what we'll do is if people raise their hand, I'll click on allow to talk, and then we can just have an open conversation instead of a total free for all. So Dan Fishman, go ahead. You should be able to unmute yourself. There we go.
Hi, thank you, Mariah. Daniel Fishman, town meeting member, Hurd Road. Thank you all for running, and thank you, Mariah, for bringing us all together on this lovely Sunday afternoon. My question's about reopening. I know the governor was frankly slow to respond to the pandemic, and I know our town took a lot of leads from him early on, and as we reopen, we're going to have to make decisions about how we do that. To what extent do you guys support following the governor's lead when it comes to reopening? And how much are you going to be willing to push both our state leaders, governors, state reps, state senator, and our local leaders of the select board to chart a more conservative path than the governor takes?
Can I say something? I'll sort of take moderator's privilege in responding to that, which, as I've been thinking about this from my role in coming on the school committee, and how we can make sure that we're making the right choice for kids in schools and teachers in schools and staff in schools. And I'm definitely, I see Brookline as having a role, not just of following his guidelines or reacting to his guidelines, but possibly being a leader and advancing sort of the state goals. And so I hope that we can actually get ahead of a lot of what's going to be discussed and really maybe change the arc of it. And so I'm hopeful that we can start to think about we have this amazing richness of expertise here in the community. And so I'd like to see some of those people guiding the select board and the school committee more closely on that. Does anyone else want to answer? If you do, raise your hand, or anyone in the public, anyone who wants to talk about this, if you raise your hand, I can unmute you and you can talk. Tommy, we have a special guest of Tommy Vitolo, who's not a Precinct 4 resident, but Tommy, I'll let you introduce yourself and you can respond.
Hi, Tommy Vitolo, state representative. Normally I hold up my little sheet that gives you my phone number and my email address, but I don't have camera privileges, so I'll just say, call me 617.
I'll promote you to panelist, hold on.
How about now? There we go.
There you go.
Tom Vitolo, 617-872-8921. Tommy.vitolo@mahouse.gov. I've been holding this sheet in Zoom meetings for 2 months now, same piece of paper. With respect to reopening, I'm hearing a few rumors. I don't know if they're true or not. What I'm hearing is that manufacturing and houses of worship will be on the early side. I don't know if that will play out or not. I frankly agree with town meeting member Fishman that the governor was slow to react. After all, he was actually on vacation when this broke. He was in Utah and came home a few days early. And he's done an admirable job, but I think he has been slow to that effect. I have filed 2 bills to help us slow down a bit. I filed a bill that would allow the town select board to put on additional business restrictions above and beyond the governor's. This was before non-essential businesses were closed. And although the bill hasn't gotten a vote yet, I do believe it helped pressure the governor to be more aggressive or more conservative, as Dan put it. I also filed a bill that would prohibit housing that is currently being lived in, not by the owner, from being shown. It's absurd to me that a landlord can send in a real estate agent and families to walk through your home just because your lease is up in a couple of months. Again, that hasn't gotten a vote yet either. I don't know that it will. I think we're going too fast on the reopening. The hospitalization rates are down, which is great. They're falling per day. The number of people in the hospital suffering from COVID-19, and that's a really promising sign. But look, Texas reopened their economy, and exactly 14 days later, they had their worst COVID-19 day yet. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that's science. And so I don't know what the governor's going to do. I will tell you that the state legislature won't have much ability to change it, nor frankly will town government. I would just implore everyone, just because the governor opens it doesn't mean you need to run out and do it. Take your time, wear your masks, keep your distance, your physical distance, be smarter than the average bear, right? Remember, half of the people on this planet are below average intelligence. Like, that's just the math. So try to be more careful than that. And that's the best advice I can give. I expect the governor will make an announcement tomorrow.
Thanks, Tommy.
Sure.
Any other questions or anything else that people wanted to? Oh, I see a hand raised. Wendy McMillan. Let me see. You need to unmute yourself, Wendy.
Okay, I did. I posed something in the question and answer that I figured I'd just ask directly. Just going back to affordable housing. The village of Brookline was mentioned, which is where I live. And we're actually losing our affordable apartments. We're losing them to market rate apartments. They're being taken and they're being renovated and they're being, marketed. We're losing family housing, and family housing isn't being replaced in Brookline. The affordable housing that's being built for the most part in Brookline is elderly housing and, one bedroom apartments. So what kind of commitment do you guys have to bringing back some real, true, like affordable housing for families? Because we are losing it in Brookline. We're especially losing it in the village. So that's kind of like my question.
Does anyone want to answer that? Go ahead, Vena.
Unmute myself. Okay, yeah. So I really think that there has to be a medium kind of, and I really do want to see, like, of course, my family is one of them in affordable housing. But at the same time, I do realize the debit. So I think maybe with the people, I think given Section 8 vouchers that switched over, and with the Section 8 voucher increase, I think that could actually play a role in accepting more people in an area that is not just meant for a single isolated area. It's more so that it can be spread out. Yeah, at first I was actually quite upset to see what they were doing to the village, and, offering people vouchers, like movable vouchers, to then lose out on their housing. but I think that building more areas that accept more people based on their income, will help bring more families in and take care of the families that are here. I know a big Section 8 opening happened here in Brookline, where a lot of people from public housing were receiving vouchers, and now the vouchers are at levels that are acceptable to find housing here in Brookline. Because what was happening prior was they were given a voucher for a family, and the voucher was for $1,600 for a 2-bedroom apartment. And this is back when I actually had an issue with it. And now they've increased it to $3,500. So it's like increasing the dollar amount of a voucher accepted in Brookline will help, I think, bring more families here to take care of them so they can live in areas that are not just designated for housing, that it's more open.
Thanks, Vena. Anyone else want to reply? And then I think we're running 20 minutes behind my perfect schedule from earlier, so we probably want to wrap it up. Go ahead, Robert, and then we'll.
So part of the problem with vouchers under Section 8 is the maximum rents are set by the federal government, and the town has little or no input into what those are. In terms of affordable housing, a lot of these 40B developments that are proposed, they should have on-site affordable housing at the developments, and they should include family units. They shouldn't only be 1-bedroom affordable housing, which we need as well, but they should include family units on site. We missed a big opportunity, I think, with Chestnut Hill Realty out in South Brookline because of the 2/3 requirement to approve any zoning changes. But we need to encourage developers to include the affordable housing on site, and it should include family units, not just 1-bedrooms.
Okay, I think we'll wrap up the program now. Thank you all so much for participating. Thank you to our town meeting member candidates. Thank you to Tommy Vitolo. Thank you to our select board candidates. And thank you, of course, to all the public who joined us today. That was really great.
But a big thank you to Mariah Nobrega for setting this whole damn thing up.
Thanks. And we did record this so we can share it with other parts of the precinct as well.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.